And hello Stowe community, welcome to part 4 of our Back to Basics tutorial series. In this tutorial I'm going to talk mostly about enemies and all the different pieces of tribal knowledge relating to putting enemies in a Foundry mission. However, before I really get into that, let's just see where we are. We're back at the same mission that we were working on in part 3. There's DJ Zuza. He says, hey you, go to Vulcan, pick up a diplomat. Then there's a first transition to a cryptic map. He says, we're entering the Vulcan system. And there's this button. I'm going to talk more about this button in a few seconds, but with the storyboard, you get to Vulcan, then you approach the planet, which was the big circle on the map, and once the player hits this edge of the circle, it transitions into the map on the ground where the objective is to talk to a contact. And so there's our Vulcan diplomat, and I put her on Vulcan right there. Now she's an NPC contact, which means that she will never fight, she'll never shoot a gun, but she can die, especially if she's too close to an enemy mob and grenades are thrown. So be very careful with that. The NPC contact can die, but otherwise it's just one single person that is in the mission to talk to. That's the only purpose of an NPC contact. There's also a few things you can do. You can animate her, you make her afraid, you could make her play air guitar or do various other animations, and you can change her state with triggers. Don't worry about triggers too much. We'll talk about those in a different tutorial. But anyways, that's my story. You get hailed by DJ Zuza, you go to Vulcan, you beam down, you talk to a Vulcan diplomat. I do want to say something about this first button that takes you into the Vulcan system. What will happen in here, I'll go ahead and show you what this looks like. Let's type in this button says stuff. Alright, and let's play the map from the beginning of the story, because that will put us in sector space. If you play the map from the map tab, it'll just load you onto the map that you're working on. But if you load the map from the storyboard, it will take you to sector space, and this is Foundry sector space, so you'll never see anybody else around here usually. And we'll set a course to the Vulcan system. Alright, so DJ Zuza hailed us, we accepted the mission, and now we've gone on to Vulcan. And as soon as we get to Vulcan, there is the door. We can enter the normal Vulcan system, which other players might be using as a social zone, or we can enter the mission that we're making. And notice there's the button. It says, this button says stuff. So I'll say, okay, I'm ready to enter the mission. And there's the pop-up. We're entering the Vulcan system. Are you ready to enter? This button says stuff. And the reason that I did that was to show you that whatever you put in this button, whether it's engage or begin my mission or play my mission, it's going to appear twice. The button's going to appear at the entry door in sector space, and it's also going to appear as it is in this dialog prompt. So I know what I like to do is I like to use begin, and then whatever the name of my mission is, I'll put there. And so they'll have to click begin twice, but at least it makes sense in both contexts, in both parts. It makes sense in the pop-up, and it makes sense in sector space. So that's what I wanted to show you real quick. All right, now let's deal with NPC groups. So I've got two maps here, Vulcan space and Vulcan ground. Let's say that I want to have an enemy mob in space, and before the player reaches the marker and beams down, they have to fight some ships. So we'll go here to NPC Groups, and the first thing that you may notice is when you click on an NPC group, it will say, it will have different restrictions based on the enemy mob. So this may be really tough for a free-to-player to understand, because there was a time when all of us played all of the cryptic content of the game from start to finish, and you had a sense of what level an enemy was based on their position in the overall story of the game. So the Borg arc was one of the last of the mission chains, so the Borg were really strong. And therefore, if you put Borg in a map now, only players that are above level 41 can play your mission. They won't see your mission if they're not up to the level to play it. Likewise, if you use a Klingon mob, well, the Klingons were some of the first people we fought, so there's no restriction. Anybody can play your mission if you use a Klingon squad. So there's a bit of tribal knowledge here. For instance, the Mirror Federation squadrons, they're restricted to 31 because, well, they were kind of in the 31 area of the game. So you can get used to that. Now, there are workarounds. For instance, if you really needed Borg, but you didn't want to restrict the mission to a level 41, you could just put an Orion mob in there, really any mob that has no restrictions, and then if you individually click on the actors, you can rename them Borg, and you can change their costume to Borg. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to fight like Borg. They're still going to fight like the ships that they are underneath the costumes. So a certain color of disruptor will still be attributed to the original mob, but they will look like Borg in the mission. And you can also do the same thing with NPC enemy squads on the ground. You can use Klingons and skin them as Borg and vice versa. But for this mission, I think I will use Klingons. So let's find Klingons, and immediately we have a choice. Our list has from battleship down to weak. Let's just click on weak, see what that says. Weak is, use this as it makes for a dull experience when overused. Use this sparingly. So, weak mobs goes from 2 frigates up to 4 frigates and 2 battleships. Well, let's put it in a mob and see put it in the map and see what it looks like. Scroll in. And the first question you probably have is, okay, well, there are 5 dots. What are those dots? Which one is which? If this thing goes from 2 frigates up to 4 frigates and 2 battleships, what does that mean? Well, what it means is this. All these 5 dots, the only time that 5 ships may appear as a mob is if 5 players are playing the mission, because the group scales. If just one person is playing your mission, it might just be 1 ship, or it might be 1 ship and a group of fighters. If 2 people are playing your mission, there might be quite a few more. If we go to Starbase UGC and you go to Noob Guides, Tutorial Guides, XR377 made this really handy, it's way at the bottom, really handy guide to NPC scaling. And that's a handy thing to use if you want to know which mob or which actors will appear with a mob depending on how many players are playing your mission. Okay, so that should help you with scaling, but another question you might have is, how difficult is the mob? One thing that you really need to know right now as you begin your career as a Foundry author is that you'll never ever really be able to test how your mission is experienced. It might be hard to one person and completely easy to another person. Or depending on their level, how many players are playing the mission, it's just not something you can test. And what's also frustrating is that when you do play the map in the Foundry, when you test it with your Foundry tune, the mobs will be incredibly easy. But once you publish that mission, the play experience will be completely different. For instance, I have a mission that I just published. It played completely different after publishing than it did when testing with my Foundry 2. It's just something you have to kind of deal with. Now, there are smart things and dumb things. Smart would be never put more than one mob in one place. You can sometimes do this if you say you put a Klingon weak squad with a Klingon set of fighters. That might work, or maybe 2 frigates in the same spot might work, but otherwise you don't want to put 2 cruisers in the same spot, and you especially don't want to put more than 1 battleship in the same spot, because it just makes it incredibly difficult for the player. So that's a general rule, is 1 mob per spot, and you won't really know how the player is experiencing the combat until you start to get reviews. Oh, I should show you that we can put the enemies in the map. So kill enemies. And we'll specify the enemy that we want to kill. It's the Klingon squad. And now there's an additional task in the storyboard, which means that the first thing the player is going to do when he gets to Vulcan is fight Klingons and then beam down to the planet. Alright, well, I hope that's helpful. Stay tuned for next time. Bye.